You have a website and now you want other people to get access to it. So what you need is a web host. So in this video, I'll talk about what web hosting even is, what are servers, what to pay attention to when you pick a so-called provider, right? So there are companies out there that will help you get your website online so other people can access it. And these companies, they try to differentiate in many ways. And I'll show you step by step what are the things that you want to pay attention to. So of course, we want our website to be fast and to have high uptime, but there are many other things as well, like how good is their customer support, their pricing. When you sign up for a subscription, you want to look not only at the first year of your hosting. Typically you're going to host for multiple years, so you want to take a look at how expensive the renewal fees are. There are some technical things we want to have, right? There are things like SSL and CDN as well. We'll talk about what those are. And there are also some more advanced features that you may need. For example, if you're a freelancer or you're an agency and you have your clients' websites, you probably want to bring that together into one hosting platform, one server perhaps. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well, right? So we're going to start from absolute scratch, just assuming that you just need a simple setup, but we'll also take a look at some more advanced options as well. So I need some hosting provider to show you all of that. And so I'm going to use SiteGround in this video. They are today's sponsor, but all of the things that we're going to talk about, I would say, are pretty universally applicable. Right now, I have enjoyed working with SiteGround so far. As of recording, they have a wonderful Black Friday deal, so I highly recommend that you check out the link in the description in case you're in the market for hosting. So check those out. They specialize in, well, WordPress hosting, but also web hosting generally. And so I will use their platform to show you step by step how to get started with hosting, how to set up a simple website, and some of the more advanced features that they offer as well. That being said, I personally really like SiteGround. I've had a great time working with them, and the reason I like them is because they do not only give you web hosting itself, they also help you with domains, and they have a centralized DNS feature. They help with email, a professional looking email, and they even have email marketing. So you get basically an all-in-one platform out of the box. So you don't have to glue together a bunch of different tools. And it's not just for beginners. If you are doing some kind of reselling, or you have clients, or you're an agency and you have multiple clients, and so you have multiple websites that you need to manage, they have a bunch of options for you as well, as I'll show you in the video. So basically with SiteGround, what I like is that it's really feature rich, right? So really I don't have to combine a bunch of different tools. And what I also like, they have a lot of improvements. So if we actually take a look at what they've been doing over the past year or so, they've made the websites even faster. And so for example, for the CDN that they have, they added more locations. That means your website is going to be copied over into more and more locations if you use their CDN. So then your users are going to be served from a server that's closer to them than some other part of the world. And that will make your website faster for them. And what I also like is their customer support. It's super fast. And I had a great time working with their support team as well. Because sometimes things just pop up during your hosting journey and you need to reach out to a human, not just an AI. I'll show you that in the video as well. But before we get there, what is hosting? What are servers? So we have a website, and a website is basically a collection of HTML, right? Maybe you've heard of that, an HTML file, but a website also needs to be styled. Typically we use CSS for that, and that is typically a separate file. And sometimes we also need some interactivity, and we use JavaScript for that. What else does a website typically have? A website typically also has images, right? So you have JPEG images or WebP, those are all images. And there could be other media assets like a video even. Typically a font, right? So font files are typically also included in a website. So I would say all of those things together is what is necessary to display your website, right? So your website consists, of course, of content. But to display the content in a browser in a nice way, in an interactive way, you're going to need a bunch of these files. And typically that's all handled for you. Now, when a user goes to your website, they need all of that, right? Now, we don't want other people to connect to our own computer. We're going to put these files on somewhere else. We're going to put them on a server somewhere else in the world. So this is a server, which you can imagine like a rectangular box of electronics. We're going to put these files on there. And then other people will connect to that box of electronics, essentially. And the box of electronics will send back those files, right? And then the user's browser will take them together and display our website as it's supposed to be displayed. Okay, now these days, these servers are all in data centers, right? So you can imagine a big data center has a lot of these servers, and these data centers could be anywhere in the world. So for example, if I'm in Germany and I'm focusing on German users, I probably want to put my website in a data center that is somewhere in Germany, right? If you're from the US, you typically want to put your website on a server, right? It depends on where your users are, but if you only serve US users, you want to put it somewhere in the US. And the US is pretty big, so typically there's a distinction between West Coast and East Coast in terms of data centers. Now, if you have users all around the world, if you have a more international site, the concept of a CDN becomes important. So a CDN is essentially, well, let's say we have users all around the world, right? Even in, right, all the way in Australia as well. So what do you do in that case? Well, if you have you could say your original server may hold all the files, and that's like the source of truth. But then these other servers are going to get a copy of that. So then when somebody from New York, let's say, wants to go to your website, they don't have to go all the way to Australia, right? So there are like internet cables, technically it's possible, but they will connect to the copy of your website in this data center here, or on this server, right? which is much closer to them. And that's basically the idea of a CDN. So that's something that you want to pay attention to when you pick a hosting provider. How easy do they make it to add a CDN? Is it included in the plan or not? All right, that's a concept of a CDN. I would say that's very important if you have an international site, but even if it's not super international, you will still have some percentage of users that are going to visit your website from other countries. Maybe they're on vacation, let's say, or maybe they're just in a different country. Typically, there's always going to be some percentage of your users so that are going to be somewhere else. It's always good to have a CDN and make sure that it's accessible in many locations around the world in a very performant manner. So a server is just essentially a box of electronics. Does that mean that if we go with a hosting provider that we sort of get the whole box, a dedicated server essentially? And the answer is no. A dedicated server where you have it all to yourself is very expensive. So over time, what happened is that the hosting provider company splits up the resources of the server. So we are essentially just buying one part of that server. It's technically possible that there are other customers, that there are other people using that server, but we are essentially just buying, let's say, 10 gigabytes of storage, some amount of resources essentially, and the hosting provider in turn splits up this box of electronics or at the software level perhaps, or some other way to make sure that we get access to that, right? So it's called shared hosting. Okay, now about these servers, how do we even connect to there? Well, this is typically how this works technically is with an IP address. So they may look like something like some number and then dot and then some other number, right? So basically something like this. This could be the IP address of, let's say, some server here, right? Just to think about it like that. Now, to go there, I would have to type that in my address bar here in the browser. And typically, we don't want our users to remember, some strange sequence of numbers. We want to have a memorable name. So, for example, I will use an example domain throughout this video. Let's say I'm building a yoga website. I'm opening up a yoga studio and I'm calling that Celestial Stillness Yoga. This is what I would want my users to type in the URL in the address bar to go to my website, right? Not this weird IP number. So this has to do with domains, and DNS is a fancy term as well, because I want to type in this in the address bar, and when I do that, under the hood, it should still use this set of numbers. Right? So now we get into the area of DNS, but that's also something that we would like to have managed for us, or maybe we want to have some control over that, right? So it depends on which hosting provider you use. They may offer it out of the box, or they don't offer it at all. And the nice thing about SiteGround is they actually offer that out of the box as well. So actually you get a free domain if you sign up for one of SiteGround's plans. You can manage it from SiteGround, so you don't have to log into some separate provider. So these are really, I would say, the fundamentals of the internet. How is that relevant? Now we know a little bit better about how to analyze these tables of pricing that you're gonna see. So SiteGround, as of recording, has the following options. So I'm actually recording from Europe, that's why it's in euros. If you're somewhere else, it's going to be probably in dollars. They offer 3 plans. The startup plan here is really for absolute beginners, very simple setup. And basically you get one website, you get some 10 gigabytes of space, and it's good for about 10,000 visits a month, right? So you're just getting started, and this would be fine to use. So a little bit more here, you get unlimited website. You get about 10 times as much monthly visits. And what's also good to mention here is there's no limit technically on your data transfer, assuming that your usage is in line with what they call fair use guidance. So as long as you're just, acting in good faith and you're not trying to abuse the system, they're not going to limit you in terms of bandwidth, because what you can imagine is people will connect to your website. The server will send back all of these files, right? These files, they have some size, right? So the HTML is pretty small typically. These are pretty small files typically, but an image file may be, let's say, 1 megabyte. Right, so if you have a nice big image on your website and you have tons of people connecting to your website, well, every time you're sending over the internet like a 1 megabyte image, it could take up a lot of bandwidth. So basically the data transfer is very high in that case. So some of the hosting providers out there will limit website in that case, or they will charge extra for it, right? But SiteGround, for example, I mean, assuming that you use it fairly, here they mention there is no limit on data transfer, okay? So those are included actually, and that's actually included in all of those plans, okay? And then we have the Go Geek plan, where essentially you get more and even more visitors monthly. In this video, I will use the Go Geek plan. Those are the main differentiators between these plans. But let's take a look at what they essentially all have, these essential features. So here we have a free domain, which is really nice because, as we just saw, we kind of have to pick a domain. We could use a third party, right? There's many third parties out there, but you have to pay extra for that. Here it's included, including .com, right? So it's not going to be some strange extension. It's actually .com, okay? So they have all of that, really nice. Free SSL. What is that actually? Because this is something that you see all the time, right? So basically, when I connect to a page like that, you can do it in two ways essentially. So traditionally we had HTTP. These days it's all HTTPS. So that's what we want. So basically it provides some additional protection between the user who's connecting to our server and the server that's sending back data. This is going to be more secure. So, well, let's say the user maybe is typing in their maybe their names and their address to my website because they can maybe book online. They can type in maybe even payment information, right? Really, you could say sensitive information. And so when they're sending that somewhere in the world to my server here, that data is going to go through some internet cable. So one way of making it a little bit more secure and sort of encrypting the data, that's the communications between the server and the user, we can do that with SSL. And so it's kind of I would say it's a must-have these days, right? And we get it out of the box as well. Right? Free email, very important because we want to look professional. Let me zoom in a little bit more. We want to look professional and we don't want to send emails from a cheap looking email address. So if I have this domain in my possession, I would like to send emails from an address that looks like this, right? So actual info at or perhaps support, right? Something like this. This is how I would like to have other people receive my email, right? So this is also something you want to pay attention to when you pick a hosting provider. How are they treating emails? Is it an afterthought, or is this something that they include out of the box? As you'll see with SiteGround, actually, it's really easy. They make it super easy to set this up properly. So if you're coming from another hosting provider, you're switching, or you're looking at another options, you want to pick a platform that offers as many migration that makes the migration as easy as possible, not just for maybe the website itself, but also for emails. Okay. All right. Databases. What are databases actually? So a database is, I didn't add that here, right? So here we talked about what a website is. Website is basically a collection of these files. Where does your actual data live? So if you have a blog, you write posts. Where are those posts? Well, if you open up the website, you may see them in the HTML. So are the posts sort of, well, so eventually the posts are sort of, you could say, embedded in the HTML. That data is typically stored in a database, right? So here you could have so here we have a database, and in my database, I can store all sorts of data. But if I have a blog, you know, the piece of data that you'll be storing are posts, for example. Right? So basically a dedicated server, right? So this could be another server, some other rectangular box of electronics that is running the database. It doesn't have to be a different box of electronics. It could be the same one. But basically it's a dedicated piece of software that's storing your data. If you have a lot of data, you are going to run into an issue perhaps with the size of the database, right? So we want to make sure that our hosting provider doesn't have like a low limit on that if you have a lot of data, for example. Okay, so they offer unlimited databases, all right, with 1,000 megabytes each in size. All right, so here we have a free CDN. So this is what we just talked about. The CDN is essentially making copies of your website in other places in the world. So then if the user is connecting from New York, they're going to connect to the server in, let's say, Washington, D.C., right? And if your user is from Los Angeles, they're connecting to a server that's actually in Los Angeles and you have a copy of your website there, right? So here you can see we get the free CDN out of the box. That would be much faster. That's going to make it much faster than if the user has to go all the way, the signal has to go all the way to Australia and back again, right? It's technically possible, but it would take multiple seconds. If you have a properly cached website with a CDN, it's going to feel very fast. So I would say this is actually a big one. So this is very nice that you get it for free out of the box with SiteGround. Backups are really fundamental as well. You're gonna make a mistake sooner or later. If it's a small mistake, it's not the end of the world. Maybe you can just fix it. But let's say you have a WordPress website and you install some new plugins or a new theme, and now your website has crashed, maybe, and you don't know exactly what went wrong, right? So this is really like a nightmare scenario. Well, as you'll see with SiteGround, it's like a one-click rollback. So they actually provide you with daily backup. So every day automatically there is like basically a copy of my website is stored by SiteGround. If I make a major mistake, I can roll back to the version of the previous day, right? Really beneficial. And actually they make it super easy. This is actually a big one. All right, so security, another big one. We get all of this in each plan, by the way. So something that could happen with our website, like if we have a website here and there's incoming requests from somewhere in the world, most of the time, well, it should be like normal users, but it could be malicious users that are trying to hurt us in some way. Or it could be a bot. So maybe you have data on your website and there's going to be somebody else that's trying to get the data in an automated manner, basically scraping your data in a sort of like a bot is what we call it. So not every request that server that your website is going to have is something that you want to trust, right? So they have some protections in place. SiteGround, for example, also offers additional caching out of the box. We'll take a look at that as well. So those are some common ones across all their plans. And now for WordPress specifically, they offer some automatic update. They offer some features out of the box as well. But there are still some changes between these plans. So here we see some exclusive features. So here on-demand backups. So, and not just like every day, but very quickly after you make a change, you have a backup. So even more backups, which is really helpful because you can make many changes and it's only the last change that you made that really, caused an issue. If you have to roll back to the previous day, you're gonna lose all of that incremental progress that you made. There is you can get more fine-grained with the backups like this. There are some PHP changes between the PHP versions and implementations. So that's something that you want to take a look at perhaps. Now the staging feature I would say is a more intermediate feature. If you have a really simple setup and you're just looking to get started and you want to make simple changes, that's maybe not something that is a priority. But as soon as you're going to take it more seriously, or you already have a website that's running pretty well and you have a lot of users or like a significant amount of users essentially, you don't want to make a mistake and get angry users. So what you want to do is if you make a change, you change the theme, for example, or you change a plugin, you commit to that change and sort of push it out to everyone. Before you do that, have a step before that where you have like a staging environment. So basically it's still as if you're going to make the change, but you can still test it and play around with it and make sure it works properly. And then you can upgrade from that environment into the real production environment and make sure everyone is using it. So this is like a step before that. And it's considered typically, if you're working with websites and software, typically this is considered a best practice. So before you actually push it out to everyone, you want to double check in a controlled environment, you could say. All right, so what do we actually get in the Go Geek plan? Even beyond that, because this is all pretty powerful already actually out of the box. But in SiteGround, for example, what you also want to pay attention to is perhaps Git. If you're familiar with if you're a developer or you have some coding experience and you have some Git experience, this is something that you may find interesting. Now, what you also want to pay attention to, especially if you're a freelancer or agency, is how easy does your hosting provider make it to manage your clients and your client's website? Do your clients want to log into an admin panel? Or do they only maybe contact you over email and then you do the changes? Well, you'll find that some clients, they actually kind of want to manage it themselves. How easy does your hosting provider make that? So for example, here in SiteGround, SiteGround allows you to essentially create an account for your client. And it's pretty cool. They will not see a SiteGround logo. So it's like you have like a custom platform almost. So I think that's really nice that they So this is something that if you're a freelancer or you're an agency, this is you don't want to pick a random hosting provider. You want to make sure they actually offer this, something like this as a feature. And of course, customer support. We always want to have good customer support, but especially if you have a well-running website, if something goes wrong, you want to have fast priority access to support. So that is something you also get on a plan like this, right? So this was just a quick overview of how to analyze a pricing table like what SiteGround is offering here. But to properly analyze it, you do need to know a little bit about how the internet works and what some of these options really mean. So that's what we just discussed. Now, of course, we also want to take a look at how it actually works in practice, right? So now, let's say we're going to go with the Go Geek plan. And again, make sure you check out the link in the description. If you want to sign up, make sure you sign up through the link. I am getting paid an affiliate commission for that, but it's very much appreciated. Creating these videos is a lot of work. So it's much appreciated if you're interested in signing up for SiteGround. All right, so let's say I signed up. I signed up for the Go Geek plan. What happens now at a hosting provider? Like, what's the next step? So you're going to have some kind of dashboard, okay? And here in SiteGround, it looks like this. I have not created any website yet. I just essentially have signed up for a plan and I have an account here with the SiteGround hosting provider. Now here you can see what your hosting provider will typically offer. Well, SiteGround is not just websites. They also help you out with domain names and even email marketing. We're going to focus mostly on websites and domains. I will show you how to set up email as well. But the first thing that they want you to do is simply to get started with the first website. Right. So here in the websites right now, I don't have any websites yet. So let's actually go click on the setup site and let's start there. All right. So here they also allow us to pick the location that we talked about this before. Where do we want to put our website? So I'm recording from Europe, so probably that's why I picked this one, but this depends on where your users are, right? So not where you personally are, it's where your users are. So if my users are in Texas, I'm not going to pick Europe, right? Because then all my users, they have to go through the internet cables all the way to Europe and back again. If your users are in Spain, you want to go with Spain, right? This is pretty straightforward. Although I guess you could make the mistake of thinking that it's about where you personally are, but it's not. I will go with I will go with the default that was picked for me. So the Netherlands. Now about the location of where your website will be. When you add a new website, whether it's from absolute scratch or you're moving over an existing website from another provider, you can always click here and choose which location should host your website, right? So we want this to be as close as possible to the bulk of our users. We'll add a CDN later so that even if they're not very close, it can still be fast for them. In addition to that, you can relocate your website. So if you decide later, I picked the wrong location, you can always relocate your website to another location. You can do all of that on a per website basis. So if you have multiple websites, they can be in different locations. All right, so it's interesting that they do not start with WordPress or something else. Typically, it starts with a domain name. All right, so then here we can pick what we want to do with our domain. So we can actually register a new domain here with SiteGround. It's included in every plan. And so if you don't have one yet, it's very easy because, again, we don't have to reach out to some separate tool or system. It's something we can manage all from SiteGround. But maybe you already have an existing one. Maybe you have already set it up in some other provider. You can do that as well. But let's say we have a new domain here. I'm going to click this one. I can just search for the domain I want. And then here I can order this right here in SiteGround. They recommend to add domain privacy. So I will do that as well. All right. And then here below I can pay. All right. So here, very important with hosting providers is migration, not just for the website, also for emails. You're going to spend a lot of time migrating. If you're picking a hosting provider that does not offer migrations out of the box, it's going to be a tough life. So it's nice that SiteGround, for example, offers it out of the box. Now we're going to start from a clean slate here, and we're going to set up, let's say, a simple WordPress website, but a lot of the WooCommerce and all these other options that you have, fundamentally, it all works the same, right? So fundamentally, you just have a server somewhere in the world. Somebody's going to connect to that. And this is all just at the software level, you could say how we can set things up. But we're going to go with WordPress here. All right, so we're going to have to log in to the WordPress admin panel. So I will just use my email address here, and I will just some passwords, okay? All right, so SiteGround here is offering me some options to add some additional protection here for WordPress. These typically do have a real value add. So if you're ever offered these things, I think they do have a real value add. It's up to you if you want to pick it. It's not really, I wouldn't say it's mandatory, but but it depends on the price, right? So if you need to take a look at the price, including the renewal fees, to decide if it's worthwhile. I will decline for now and just continue. All right, so they have some other extras here for email marketing. I think that's really interesting as well, because these are some of the common activities. It's not just about a website anymore, right? So these days it's about domains, it's about receiving emails, sending emails with a nice domain in the email address, but also email marketing. Right, I want to send emails to my customers. I have a new product or a new service, and I want to get the word out. I want to email them. So it's nice that if you have a hosting provider that has many of those features in one platform, that's a major plus. So you can see SiteGround, for example, has a lot of that here in the dashboard, as you'll see. All right, so it's going to take a minute or so to set up my site. It's essentially just going to install a WordPress instance on a server somewhere in the world. All right, so after a couple seconds, your website in your hosting provider will be finished. So here in SiteGround, they give you an overview and they give you two options here. What it essentially means is that we bought some compute resources, right, on a server somewhere. So they have sort of reserved that for us. In this case, they have installed a WordPress instance using those, right, on those resources. So WordPress itself will already take up some space, for example. Okay, now here they give you two options. So WordPress itself has a dashboard, an admin panel, where we actually manage our content. We can do a lot of things there, but for a lot of things like the server itself or email setup, things that don't necessarily have to do only with that particular WordPress instance, you're dealing with the dashboard of the hosting provider. So you may have heard of cPanel, that's a popular one, but SiteGround has a custom one, which they call Site Tools. So let's actually go there first. All right, so here we get into SiteGround's Tools section, Site Tools. Here we can manage a lot of things that have to do with our site. So we, in this dashboard here, get an overview of some things, so disk space, even the IP, and the name server. So now it should properly work when I go to this address now. Let's actually go there and see. All right, so what you're gonna see is some like default screen that SiteGround is giving you. So they have some setup wizard here. So if you're creating a particular website in these categories, they help you out in some way. Let's actually do that. So I'm doing a yoga website. I guess that falls under fitness. So let's see what we get. I will proceed. Okay, they have some templates here. I think I like Life Coach here. Let's pick that one. Really nice, actually, if your hosting provider gives you a quick way to get started. So I like contact form. Yes, I need to add a form because I want people to contact me. Let's say maybe I allow them to buy or sign up in some way. So I could already start using WooCommerce as well. So basically they give you some standard plugins out of the box here, basic setup. Let's say I like that, continue. I can always change this later if I want. I can also exit wizard and just start with a clean install, but it's nice to have a sort of like a quick start and get a standard setup going quickly. All right, so it's going to install those plugins and we'll check back in a second or so. Let's take a look at the dashboard in the meantime. So you will also see your statistics here, right? Unique visitors and page views, right? So one individual in the world can visit many pages, right? It would be one person here, one unique visitor, but they can view 10 pages, right? So you would get 10 page views here, right? But they also have more. So this is really important for analyzing, especially as you start getting some traffic. Very important, I would say, that your hosting provider shows you where they're coming from. So this is really important. You have some kind of way to analyze the data, right? This is really gonna allow you to grow. What are the most popular pages on your website? So maybe you see that one of your pages is really popular and it turns out that the source of the traffic is Google, let's say, right? If Google is sending a lot of traffic to you, you want to take a look at the keywords, and perhaps you can create more content about that because it's, according to the statistics, it's where a lot of people are coming from, right? So you'll spend some time here analyzing the data, especially as you start growing your traffic. This becomes really important to continue to grow. All right, let's check back here. All right, so congrats, your site is ready. We can view our site. Let's actually take a look. All right, so this is now the default template that somebody would see if they come to our website. All right, you can see now my URL is using that domain that I registered here with SiteGround. Super handy. I don't have to go out to some domain registrar company. I can do it all here in SiteGround. Now, if you do have an external domain registered already somewhere else, you can still use SiteGround. You just have to use these name servers in that domain's registrar dashboard. You need to point your domain at SiteGround like this, with these name servers, and then when somebody types in your domain, they will go to your SiteGround hosted website. But I can manage my DNS, my domain here in SiteGround really nice, and I don't have to reach out to some separate domain registrar dashboard. It's all here in SiteGround, right? Which is really important because these domains, you have to renew them every year or so. And so if you have it on a separate domain registrar, for example, it's pretty common that people forget about them. And so after a year, suddenly you notice, oh, my domain is actually expired. And somebody else could then at that point pick up your domain. So it's just really beneficial to have everything managed from one place. Okay, so they have a centralized DNS, which improves performance and simplifies our DNS management. If you register the domain name through SiteGround, you will most likely see that the HTTPS SSL is already configured. But let's say you have a domain name from an external provider. In that case, the SSL or HTTPS is not configured automatically out of the box. So let me quickly show you how to do that in the dashboard in that case. So let's actually see what we can do here. Here we have security. Here we have SSL manager, right? So really important that your hosting provider offers this. We have select domain. I want to go with let's encrypt, and boom, just one button click. Let's see what happens. All right, after a couple seconds, let's encrypt is installed. We can click on configure HTTPS. Now if I try typing my domain name with HTTPS, you can see we don't get a warning. So this seems to be working now, but people could technically still write like HTTP, something like this, or some other things. So typically we do want to enforce. So basically, it's just an additional way of securing the website. I like to add this. It's going to use HTTPS, going to force. It's essentially going to force the user to use HTTPS. Again, really important that SSL HTTPS is something that your provider is using. So SiteGround makes it super easy. That's another thing that we don't have to worry about. So we have the basics now, right? So we have a domain name. It's properly domain name set up properly. We have SSL. What else can we do in this site tools dashboard that SiteGround offers us and that you really want in a hosting provider? So I would say email accounts is pretty, it's pretty common that you want like a special one, right? So here, for example, I want to have support at my domain name, okay? I will just create, right? all right, so we need a password for that. All right, so then it's actually going to create that email account for me. And you can see it's already been created for me, right? So now I have support at mydomainname.com. If you go to your options here, we can log into webmail. So this is a separate part here. But you can see here, I get an email inbox, right? Really nice webmail. I can send an email here and it's going to come from this particular address. So I will actually send an email just to prove that to you. I will send it to my bytegrad@gmail.com, just a test. Okay, so I'm going to send this email. All right, so now if I log into my email, I see that I received an email from, well, let's take a look, from support@celestialstillnessyoga.com. So I just set up my webmail essentially, and it's literally like 2 button clicks. So it's hard to live without this, to be honest. Email is so important, and the fact that it's so easy, like you want a hosting provider that makes email very easy. And they set up my email inbox here, but they also have a dedicated email marketing tool. So you can take it even further. We can even configure a lot of things here. Like if you want to use a different email client, you don't want to use this one. Maybe you have something that's native on iOS, or you like Outlook, you can use that here as well, right? You have your settings here. So now we have a basic setup going, right? We have HTTPS, we have our domain name, we have email setup. What are some other typical things that you want to look at? So I want to have a lot of backups because I could make changes to my WordPress website, right? I could go into my WordPress dashboard. This is a different dashboard, right? I could log in with my credentials that we set up earlier. And here we have our WordPress dashboard. Now, remember, I picked some default options during the setup wizard that's offered by SiteGround, which is nice because now I don't have to set up everything individually here. You can see I have like a bunch of things out of the box which are relevant for a particular template. So especially if you have a standard website, like a yoga website or like a fitness instructor website, things that fit well within a particular template, you can get started very quickly. Now, if it's a little bit more niche, then you may want to start from a clean slate. I could add my posts here if I want. I can start customizing here, right? Your traditional WordPress admin panel. All right, now what if I go to appearance here and, I do something strange with my theme? Let's say I actually, change themes. And suddenly now if I go back to my website here, I can see that something has changed, and I don't like the change, but I don't know what went wrong. Right? Of course, I know now what I did, but it happens sometimes that something went wrong. You don't know, because you made a bunch of changes, you don't know exactly what went wrong, so you don't know how to fix it. All right, so in that case, it's really important that your hosting provider has backups. So either you have to set it up yourself, or your hosting provider will do it for you. You're gonna need backups. Now, really nice about SiteGround, for example, is that they give you these daily backups. Here they even show you that all sites come with automated daily backup included for up to 30 days. So just to show you how these backups work, I'm recording this a couple days later, and now you can see it has automatically added these backups once a day. So what's the benefit of this? Well, now if I go here and I change something about my site, maybe I install new plugins, or I'm gonna change my theme again. So just to show you, this is what it looks before. Now I'm gonna change my theme. Let's say I just activated a new theme. So I just clicked on the other theme, this one. Now, if I go back to my website, you can see the font has changed here. It looks a little bit different. There's like a different button. So there are some changes here, but I don't like the changes, and I don't know what went wrong. This is a simple mistake, right? Just some design thing, but it could actually be a huge issue where it's not functioning properly, or it's really affecting the experience that your users have. You want to be very careful with plugins and your themes, but sometimes things go wrong, and now I want to go back to what I had before. So I can go here, I can say, you know what? I want to go back to the most recent backup. I can go here and I can say restore all files and database, and I can confirm. All right, after a couple seconds, my backup is complete. Let's check out my website now. If I refresh here, you can see I have my old design back. My website now looks the exact same as before, right? So super useful, and it's automatically included in my plan here. Every day I get a backup now, right? So really slick. And if I want, I can also add more backups on demand if I want. So it's not just limited to one per day. Typically, you would make a backup before you make any big changes, right? So then if something goes wrong, you can always roll back. All right, now we could have also easily avoided this problem in the first place if we were using a staging environment before we pushed the change to everyone else, right? So here under WordPress, you can see there is a staging option here. So making changes to your live site is risky. We essentially want to test it on a copy before it's really deployed to everyone, right? So here I can say something like, well, I can actually just call a staging here. I will just confirm here. Right, so then a staging environment is created. I call it staging, that's why it's here. But let's, now I can go there, and this is essentially a copy of our site. So you can see it's like we're logging into a whole new dashboard here. It's essentially just a copy. The SSL may not work out of the box, but if we make a change here, right? So now, for example, if I want to make or test a change, I can go to themes here, for example, and let's say I do want to use the Astra theme again. I'm going to activate it. Now I can visit my site. Okay, so now I think this looks good. There are no problems. But if I go to my real website right now, you can still using that old theme, right? But in the staging environment here, if I go to the site, you can see that there's like a subdomain staging too. You can see it's already using the new theme now. Here it is using the old theme, right? So in the staging environment, everything looks good. Now I want to upgrade it to the real one. I can go here to actions, and I can say deploy this staging one. I can confirm. Okay, so after some time it's deployed. So now if I go to the real one again without the subdomain, you can see it has that new the theme again, right? So now everyone would see the new theme again, right? So really helpful to have some kind of staging tool for your hosting provider. SiteGround offers it here out of the box. We want our website to be fast, right? So of course, we already talked about CDN. They offer you a basic CDN out of the box. So I'm gonna go with this one. I'm gonna activate it for free. All right, so then CDN is enabled. So what we just talked about, where you have copies of your website in other places in the world, which is gonna make it faster for those people. A basic option here is available out of the box. Really important, I think, for your hosting provider to offer something like this as well, right? We can get more advanced here with caching purchase. They offer this other option as well, caching. So they have additional caches beyond that. So the web server itself, Nginx, which is used under the hood here, there are some options here, a dynamic cache and some other options here. But basically, we have additional options here to really squeeze out the maximum performance out of our websites, right? So that's really important for a hosting provider as well. Now about those caching, by the way, if you really want to squeeze out as much as possible, they have the speed optimizer version. Basically all the advanced caching is all in one. We can enable that if we want, or you may want to use the speed optimizer plugin. So basically all the three caching layers in one. So if you really want to squeeze out as much as possible, so if we really want to squeeze out as much as possible in terms of performance, that is something that SiteGround offers as well. These are also some right? So now we're getting to more intermediate features, which I think is really helpful. But there are some other things we also want to do. So here we at some point may want to need other people's help. So there should be other people that perhaps log in to their accounts, and they should maybe also be able to edit or manage the websites that we have. So I can go to the users screen here and I can add a new user. So here I can collaborate with other users, or let's say I have a client and they want to manage their own website. It's really helpful if this is offered out of the box. It's a major hassle if you need other people to essentially log in and manage their websites and it's not offered out of the box. So you want to have a hosting provider that has thought about this, and here they have even pick the option for Collaborator. If you have an editor on your team, let's say, or you have a client that wants to manage their own website, really, really beneficial that we can set it up here. All right, so another really helpful feature, if your hosting provider has it, is that sometimes you need to edit the essentially source code of your website. So basically what we see here in a WordPress admin panel, this is based on some code. But sometimes we want to do something that will require to change that code. For example, if you want to create, let's say, a multi-site WordPress instance. So very common for, let's say, universities that want to give each department their own website, but still have a shared theme and shared plugins, but each department should have their own content, basically, right? In that case, it may be necessary to go into the source code. So here under File Manager, you can see we have two websites essentially, because the staging is like a copy. I don't want to go in here. I want to go to the actual one. Here under public HTML, basically we're now browsing the, so you could say source code or like the code of our WordPress instance. So everything that you see here, right, it needs to know what options to show in the sidebar, right? So that's all configured in these files. So you typically don't want to do anything here, only if you have very specific instructions and you know what you're doing. You want to go in here. But for example, for a multi-site, you may have to change the config file, I believe, right? So you would have to replace something here. You have to set some variable to true. And once you've updated that, the WordPress admin panel will update as a response to that. Now, very important with your hosting provider, it would be really nice if they offer an IDE, like a code editor here in the dashboard. I've tried it sometimes without a dashboard and you have to awkwardly download some files and then edit them and then re-upload them. It's a major hassle and a lot of things go wrong. So with SiteGround, for example, it's another really big benefit is they offer you that essentially here in the dashboard. I think that's a really big one, especially if you have a more intermediate or advanced setup. So we just saw some users. You can create separate users, but if you have multiple clients, let's say, each one would have their own website. So I would simply create another website and you would have multiple entries here. So I have only one here, but if you have multiple clients, you can manage them separately, right? So they would all have their own WordPress admin panel and also their own site tools, right? So all the dashboard options that I showed you, these would be specific to that particular instance. So it's very nicely separated, both in terms of users, user accounts, and also in websites. So I think as a freelancer or agency, you want to go with a hosting provider that has thought about those things. And I think SiteGround has a really nice set of options for that. Also very important, we want to host our websites in a location that is as close as possible to our users. You can relocate your website. So if you decide later, I picked the wrong location, you can always relocate your website to another location. You can do all of that on a per website basis. So if you have multiple websites, they can be in different locations. Right, so that's another really big benefit if you have clients in different locations around the world. You can also see here under websites, I also have collaboration. So if you are, for example, collaborating with other people on a particular site, or they are with you, you could find that here. That's how they would see it. And here, so here when we could create new users, but we can also assign them a particular role. So we can create a role ourselves. There is a default client role, which we can add users to. Right, so here, if I create a new user, I can add a client here essentially. They have a default client role with certain permissions, but the collaborator feature, right? So, and then if the client logs in, SiteGround has removed some of their own branding, for example. So it's not immediately obvious that it's just a SiteGround panel that they're logging into, but it's almost like your own panel as in a way that it's almost like they're logging into a panel of yours. So they have really made it a more like white label experience for you as a freelancer or agency. So I, of course, have my DNS in that external provider, but I can do a lot of things in SiteGround if I want. So it's really nice if your hosting provider has a more centralized way to deal with DNS, right? So I don't have to go into a separate admin dashboard, but I can do everything from one dashboard. So SiteGround, for example, offers a lot of those features. I can do a lot of things here with DNS. So it's really nice if you have like centralized DNS features, right? So I just gave you a quick overview of SiteGround, and hopefully you have a good idea now on what to look out for. Now here in SiteGround specifically, I could show you many other things like migration, search and replace is a pretty cool feature. I want on the actual website, for example, maybe I was using a particular phrase very often, right? So swap burning out. I want to change this string with burn, just burn. So now I can do search and replace, and it will find all of those strings on my website and replace it. Now, if I refresh, you can see burn out for, right? Very, right? If you have lots of content, this would be a really good feature to have as well. And there are so many other things actually. So cron job. So you really get into more advanced features. You want to make sure that your platform your hosting provider allows you to grow, right? So you may start off in a small way. Over time is really beneficial if those more advanced features come out of the box as well. All right, now I didn't run into any issues with SiteGround so far. And again, I had a great time working with SiteGround, but it's possible that at some point, that you have some issue and you need to speak to an actual human. So here I can check out the customer support. So they have some collection of typical questions that people may have. It's pretty likely that your question is going to be already answered by one of these. Right, we can go here. Right, they have a huge collection of questions that other people already had and have already been answered. Now, we, of course, at some point also want to have the ability to actually contact a human, not just an AI. So I can do that very easily here. Let's say I have an issue with my DNS setup, maybe a more advanced issue here, manage advanced DNS settings. And then here I can say, let's say I want to reset my MX records for some reason. So they give you some suggestion here, but ultimately you can click on this, didn't work for me, and now I can chat with an actual expert. All right, so here I just quickly describe my issue. I would like to reset my MX record, and I'm gonna click on chat now. So now it's gonna find somebody from SiteGround's team, and literally within seconds I am already speaking with an actual human being. Let me just quickly tell them they don't have to actually answer the question here. I'm just recording a YouTube video here, but it's super fast, and SiteGround trains their customer support team in-house. And they're friendly, they know a lot about the platform. And I actually had a great time with the customer support, and actually looking around, a lot of people actually have really great experiences with the SiteGround customer support. So that's another really good reason to use SiteGround. All right, I will close out of here. Right, so I would say SiteGround is a really feature-rich hosting solution. And as of recording, they have a really beneficial Black Friday sale. So if you're looking for hosting, I would really appreciate it if you use the link in the description. It's up to you, but you can find it in the description. They have some unique features, right? Really powerful solution. And I want to thank SiteGround for sponsoring this video. And I want to thank you for watching. Hopefully it's helpful in your journey in choosing a hosting provider. In any case, have a nice day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.